and we're good to go.
Thank you, Nicola. I'd like to call the Marine Recreational Fisheries Development Panel meeting to order, better known as the Rec Panel. And at this time, I would welcome announcements, and I believe Commissioner Amadon would like to say a few words.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Bogdan. Thank you very much for giving me a few minutes. I'd like to have a couple of announcements for you to talk about. I got a call a little more than a week ago from the MWRA Director, Fred Lasky. He called to say that he was very pleased to announce that the MWRA had completed their portion of the work at the Deer Island Pier that we've all been looking forward to. And now that their work is complete and caught up with ours, they are looking forward to a big celebration come springtime, which I'm sure all of you folks are as well. But it's comforting to know that finally all of that work has been completed, even though we had to do it under some very strange conditions. Secondly, we had just a little over a week ago, we had our Performance Recognition Program Awards, which is a department-wide program where we take in nominations from various different teams throughout the department for work that they've done above and beyond the call of duty. And the CARES Act team rose to the top very quickly. They were nominated and received an award for their efforts in providing the monies from the CARES Act, which they were also not only the first ones in the country to get a proposed program together and submitted to ASMFC and NOAA, but they were the first ones approved with their program. Subsequently, the people at that level appreciated the way that they put this together so well that they asked if they could utilize that as a nationwide example of how these programs are to be run. And then they followed that effort up with being the first in the nation to start cutting checks. And they finalized it by being the first in the nation to complete issuing all of those CARES Act checks to some very well-deserving fishermen. So it's pretty proud stuff to see our CARES Act team be the leaders in the entire nation for the CARES Act program. After going through the performance recognition program, we also submitted them up to the governor's level for awards that he has of a similar nature. And I'm happy to say that they were nominated and received the Manuel Carbello Excellence in Public Service Award. That is a very big deal. They were competing against an awful lot of people. So we are standing with a whole bunch of folks on our team that are not only the best in the nation, but the best in our state. And we should all be very proud of the work that team has done. And that concludes my comments, sir. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Director McKiernan, did you want to say a few words now, or did you want to save everything for later?
No, I'd like to thank Ron for those kind words. To put it in perspective for this group, it was the for-hire sector that was the recipient of the CARES funds, and actually we forced that money out as fast as we could back in June, early July, for the party boats and the charter boats soon after that. So yeah, great team that we put together there. The only other comment I'd like to make is when we do get to the Deer Island project, I have a trailer for the movie that's coming out. I have about a 1-minute clip that the production company that is helping us do that video, they weren't able to finish it on time for this meeting because of actually COVID issues. Some of the folks who are working on it actually had family members that came down with COVID. So they were prevented from working full time. And but I do have a trailer, and I think you'll like it. So Kevin Creighton has that link, and I'm going to hope that he can put it up on the screen during that part of the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Director. Are there any others that would like to make an announcement? All right, hearing none. Before us, we have the draft meeting agenda for today. Before I ask for a motion to accept it, are there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to propose adding an item just before we start talking about the public access projects. I realized after we put the agenda together that few of the programs that we fund through this panel have been impacted by COVID. So I'd like to take a minute or two, if I could, to tell how we've been impacted on those
Now,
programs.
that will go before 2A.
Yeah, it's actually in the PowerPoint presentation, so we can just move to that when we.
Perfect, perfect. Are there any other additions or corrections? Hearing none, may someone from the rec panel please make a motion to accept it as agenda, as presented with the addition?
Kevin Blinkoff here, motion to accept.
Can I have a second?
Here the next second.
Thank you so much. Any additions, any additional comments? If none, all those in favor? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to the draft minutes of the April 28th meeting. Taking minutes is not an easy task. And I've been in a position where I've had to be the minute manager for many different organizations, or, you know, when I was in a principal, we revolved the administrative council, we revolved our meetings, and each person was responsible. It's not an easy task. And I'd like to thank Gene Hayes of the Gloucester office for putting the draft meeting minutes together for us. And are there any additions or corrections to the draft meeting minutes of April 28th? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to accept them as presented?
Sure, Patrick Paquette will make the motion to accept the minutes from.
May I have a second? Thank you, Patrick. May I have a second, please?
Here the next second.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any additional comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Let's move on to item 2, public access large project schedule. And that's going to be led by Dr. Armstrong and Mr. Kessler.
Okay, Julia, could you bring up the PowerPoint? Okay, next slide, please. So as I said, I wanted to update you very briefly about some of the things that we're involved with at this panel, how it's been impacted. Not all of them do we fund, but staff is involved with. So probably the most important was MRIP was put on hold because of the COVID, and that was nationwide. And we decided to move forward in May to resume the sampling under very safe conditions. We were one of the first states to resume. They all eventually did. And it worked out pretty well. We got a few less, I think, measured samples because people didn't want to get that close up. And the important thing is we did not go we started going on head boats, and staff called sort of in a panic that on the head boats, there was no social distancing. There were no masks. So we pulled the plug on that, as did every state. So we don't have data for head boats for this year primarily. And there are statistical methods that they'll have to use to work around it, but it'll introduce some certainties. The other thing is all our angler ed activities that you folks fund had to be put on hold for obvious reasons. This one, you don't fund it, but it's really important and staff participates. The spring and fall trawl survey, a 60-year time series, did not go out in the spring, did not go out in the fall. And I think in the spring it will be dicey whether we go or not. And that's true of the federal surveys too. So again, that's going to be a big hole in the assessment that they're going to have to come up with some statistical techniques to kind of smooth through those missing holes. I am very glad to announce you guys are very involved with our Enhancements program. All our Enhancements sampling, for the most part, was accomplished, and that's age samples from the runs and counts and all that. We managed to do it using dedicated crews who worked together all the time and did social distancing and all that. So that was tremendous. Kudos to that whole group who managed to keep those time series going. We also managed to do some fish passage projects, and staff that you guys fund, of course, is involved in all of that. And we'll report on that next spring. Some really good projects were completed. And we managed to do phase 1 of the striped bass terminal tackle study, which has been funded by this panel. And that's comparing circle hooks and J hooks. So we did get it done. We put out 150 acoustic tags in Salem, Beverly Harbor, and we're still collecting and analyzing the data from receivers all over the East Coast. And we'll probably be able to report on that in the spring. And that, Mr. Chairman, is my updates. Any questions from anyone?
Hey, Mike.
Yep, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. Is that when you said that the spring and fall trawl survey, are you talking, is that the NEMAP survey too?
Yeah, those were put on hold too. I was talking about ours, Mass State Waters specifically, but NIMS and the Mid-Atlantic NEMAP they were all closed up.
Jesus. Okay, thank you.
Mike Pier has his hand up.
Thank you. Mike, just a quick question. You said that you're still evaluating your study, circle hooks and J hooks. Any initial conclusions, or it's premature for you to indicate anything? Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, it really, we don't have any conclusions, no. Initially, we had to standardize hook size because we were noticing the smaller circle hooks were hooking up deeper. So we moved to a bigger circle hook, which is really what's being used. That's about the only observation that I could qualitatively say we may have seen that effect.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
I'm not
All
seeing
right.
any other hands.
Okay. Next slide, Julie. Okay. So I'm going to hand off to Ross now. We're going to update you on the Deer Island Pier, and then we'll talk about where we are with large projects that you approved for us to move forward, and then go into the discussion of the rather large backlog of potential large projects we have. And then we'll go into talking about, do we want to consider raising fees to fund public access, fishing access projects in a more efficient manner. So Ross?
Hey, Mike, would this be a good time to show the trailer?
Oh, I think it would be.
Can Kevin pull that off for us?
Kevin should be able to share his screen.
No sound, Kevin. Kevin, can you make the sound? Can you broadcast sound at all?
Nope.
You guys get no sound, right?
Right.
No. Kevin, are you trying to make the sound work, or should we
well,
move on?
I just got
Okay.
back on. I'm gonna give it one more shot. And if it's no good, actually we're on Julia's screen, right?
Yeah, you should be able to share again.
Yeah. We tried to test this ahead of time without luck. Give it one more try. You'll know right away if there's any sound.
No. Okay, we can send it around to the team.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
So anyway, you guys got a glimpse of the pier, and it's really nice pier, and it'll be a fishy spot. So we will have a grand opening sometime next year, hopefully in the spring when the fish show up. But I suspect, given the vaccination schedule, it may not be till midsummer or something like that. So anyway, go ahead, Russ.
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you for showing up today. Yeah, Deer Island is complete, finally, thank goodness. These are some pictures, first of all, of construction as it was taking place. A lot of you guys saw these pictures or similar ones through updates. I think it's a beautiful spot. Every time we took down the fencing around it, people walked out there. They wanted to see what was going on. I've been out there a couple of times since it's been finished to look at some punch list items, and people just go to watch airplanes take off and land. When the fishing's good, it's going to be great. I think it's going to be very similar to the type of traffic you get where you have anglers at the end and people sort of walking in and out. Just a great addition to a really nice public access location, not just for fishing on Deer Island, but this will, there will be fishing there constantly if it is anything like the shoreline has been throughout construction and before. Next slide, please. So anyhow, we will move on to completed projects. Next, I updated this map that is on the DMF website in the last couple of weeks. This represents 39 projects that we've completed since 2011. That includes everything from small grant to large projects and everything in between. In the next few weeks, hopefully we'll hear back from the governor and be able to award small grant, which will be 3 more projects. And then we're working on another project with Doug in Office of Fishing and Boating Access, so that I guess we'll make 42 by this spring. So we're trying to do the best we can with the money we're getting. We're doing a pretty good job. Next slide, please. I guess I'll digress for just 1 second. If anyone would like a copy of that map on the prior slide, it's interactive, whereby you can zoom in on each location, click on each dot, and it'll tell you what the project is. Please contact me by email and I'll send you a link to that if it hasn't been updated on our website yet. I worked with the upgrade. I did not look at the website yet. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. So anyhow, large projects that we've completed are somewhat numerous. We started, I guess, with Oak Bluffs and the first Bass River project, another Bass River project, Deer Island now. So they're moving right along. Next slide, please. We've also got small grant, which you're all aware of. Next slide, please. The current large projects we're working on as we speak. As of yesterday, the redecking of Besse Park Wareham Fishing Pier went to bid. Doug can discuss that or answer most of the questions that relate to that. Those are 2 ADA acceptable piers that are in Wareham at the Narrows on the Wareham River where the Agawam enters in. And that is a project that's owned by DMF. FBA did the engineering work for it, and I believe that Wareham owns the actual property. It's a perfect example of towns and state agencies working together, which I think we do really well. Next slide, please. This is going to be a really big one. Salem Willows. The Salem Willows Pier is over 100 years old. It's currently condemned. It's unsafe to walk on. Salem has done a great job keeping it going for the last decade, where they've just really had to hold it together with baling wire and duct tape. And then finally, it just got to the point where it's no longer doable. We have a cost share on this project. So that's going to be a great one. It's going to be about 260 or no, 260 was Deer Island. I think closer to 300 feet long. We've got a new engineer hired on that. As you can see at the end, the engineering phase should take about 2 years. Construction can be done in 9 months. And I like this caveat: if everything goes perfectly, because we know how often that happens. Next slide, please. So now we want to look forward to the future. And I know that my bosses throughout my time in the role I have said, we need to get lots of projects in the queue. So when money's available, we can move on it. Some of the projects that you see here, I have 9 of them that I listed, have LMAs, land management agreements, already established. Others would be very easy to convert. Sometimes it's very difficult to get a town to put the effort into contracting with us if they know that they're looking at least 10 years into the future. These projects, not unlike the map you look at, demonstrate a coast-wide effort on our part. So we're not favoring one area over the other. We're trying to be equitable in not just the location of these, but the size of a lot of these projects. And I think that serves our constituents in the best way. So as you can see here, it's quite an exhaustive list. Next slide, please. And okay, it's another addition. So Mike Armstrong made this addition to my outline, and I think it's probably pretty accurate. In order to fund all of these with level funding, the way that we have it now, it would take us about 41 years. And that ignores any new projects or any new needs that we would need to add to that list. So it's, we have a lot more interest than we have dollars at this point. Next slide, please. And I think this is where I end. Thank you all. And I guess before we move on, does anyone have any questions? I went through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, Julie, can you move back to the last slide? Great, thanks. Any questions? So one of the things we want to discuss briefly is the prioritization of this. And we've been doing it on an ad hoc basis. Generally, whoever is the most ready to move forward is how we've picked. And we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to bring them to you. Things that may change is we have at least one pier where some local folks are looking to get funding to supplement what we would put in. And I think we're operating, if you come with $1 million and you only want 500,000 from us, then we'll probably move that to the top. And right now we've been doing one big project at a time. Well, Ross may disagree, but we would probably do another one at least at the same time. So the prioritization is very ad hoc right now. If anyone has any opinions about how we should prioritize things, we do try and move north and south, alternate. So we wind up at the end of 41 years with piers all over the state. So does anybody have any comments about prioritization?
Mike, it's John.
Hi, John.
Yeah, I'd just like to say the old Brightman Street Bridge was a pretty popular fishing spot. That's been closed since they built the new bridge. So I think, either the Somerset or the Fall River spot would be pretty popular with, whatever you want to call it, inner city anglers. So, I'd be definitely in favor of those two taking some kind of priority.
Yeah. And they've been in the queue for a bit, so they are high up.
Khalil here, I have a question. Are these brand new projects as far as the piers, or are they already existing and need renovation? And did we recognize these as a possible project, or did the various communities reach out to us?
I think it's a combination of us finding them and towns coming to us, probably weighted more to towns coming to us. But we're trying to work very closely with the towns. I'll let Ross comment on repair versus new one. I think most of them will be new. Ross?
I think the easiest way to answer this would be just simply to go through the list quickly. So Somerset is a bigger project next to the old Brightman Street Bridge that John Boardman mentioned. And the town came to us. They want to make a general park there. So that would be a shared type property, not unlike Deer Island, but probably a much smaller scale, and the engineering would be much simpler. So they approached us for a brand new fishing structure, which would then, I guess, take the place of what the Brightman Street Bridge used to be, where people used to fish off the bridge. Fall River, I think I approached them initially years ago with Jack Shepherd, and we have a location picked out that's a very popular fishing location. If we could get 40 or 50 feet out, there's some real snags in there, and I like to refer to them as the local fishing mafia. It's a contingent of guys who fish every day up and down the river from shore. Real neat group of people. They are in favor of that location, and that the town and harbor masters jumped on board. Dighton has a shore access area where people fish from shore, and Jack Shepherd proposed a small pier with a car top / canoe kayak type access there, and the town was highly in favor of it. Dartmouth is the Paid Narrum Bridge, which has been a very popular fishing location for years, but there's user conflict there. So we've been working with the town on and off. We really ran into a stalemate with them. And I think if we were able to, present money or a sooner timeline, that would have created some urgency. Wareham is a new idea upriver from the Narrows that the town approached me about. Willows Pier is a DCR property, which is essentially condemned right now. And with Lynn updating the entire shoreline there currently, that would be a great place for a pier. That would be at the mouth of the Saugus River. I guess it was a very popular, good fishing location. People still do fish off of it, but I mean, I've walked out there and you can put your feet right through the deck boards. It's not safe. Needs to be completely demoed and replaced. Beverly would like to have a dedicated fishing pier. They've always had user conflict on their shoreline fishing access. Fairhaven, although we did have issues with them a number of years ago, have come back to us with an area called Little Bay, which is an incredibly popular location. And then the Army Corps of Engineers Cape Cod Canal platforms. This is actually an idea that was brought to be by Mike and Sheila Moss. And we've spent some days, driving around looking at the canal. And with the exception of the Scusset Pier, they would like to see, or we would like to see, smaller platforms for people who are, not as physically able to go rock hopping, have places distributed through the canal. I've talked to the managers there, and because we don't really have any funding that's available, it's sort of remained a concept versus, being able to move forward on it. I think it would really, it would enable people who aren't as able to be able to once again enjoy the canal the way they used to when they could hop on their bikes or move from spot to spot. Now they're currently limited to Scusset once again. So I hope that answers everyone's question, but if they've got more questions, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a great review, Ross. I really appreciate it. And it kind of clarifies whether or not, someone approached us or you approached them. So it was well worth you going through the list. Thank you so much.
Patrick has his hand up.
Thank you for the presentation, Ross, and thank you very much for going over those. That was my first initial comment was going to be, can we please get a review of some of these, because I wasn't aware of all of them. To answer Mike Armstrong's question about seeking any input, when I look at that map, which is really helpful that we showed a few minutes ago, the area in the state that seems to be the one that hasn't been granted or that we haven't placed a large project is that southeastern Mass area. So my thought would be that after Salem Willows, that the next large project be in that southeastern Mass area, south of the Cape. It just seems like when I look at the map, like that's the next spot that we should be going towards. As far as the order of this stuff, I think that the criteria that Mike laid out regarding opportunity and whatnot, and how this stuff is evaluated is obviously, I think, just common sense. But I do think the next large one should be in Southeast Mass. As far as which one of those Southeast Mass ones is correct, I think there's probably more discussion to get there. And it was and one final comment, I guess, question. Fairhaven is the town that we had the issue with, that we lost some money on a project, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And they've also, at least, maybe Doug can answer this better. I think he's had more communication with them. I think that their mea culpa is that they've sort of come forward saying that they would pay for an engineering if we went ahead with the project in Little Bay. So that would be their, making amends for the prior project that fell apart.
Yeah, I'm not my opinion about working with that town isn't the punishment you owe us money. It's that, can they be trusted? Because that was a signed agreement that they went back on back then. So that's the part that scares me with anything with a town that's already we've seen do that. But beside that, you have other stuff in southeastern Mass that's above that on your list. So it's not really a big issue. I just want to remember which was the town that we had the issue with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the panel members?
All right, I'll go back. So if we'll just stay on this for a second, just so we'll move into to frame the discussion coming up. Each of these, you know, they range from Salem is probably going to be $3 million. Some of these are under $1 million. Most are over $1 million. Boston, Deer Island, correct me, Ross, but I think came in ultimately with change orders and such, came over just 2 million.
Yeah,
So for
that's
a standard, how long is Deer Island, Ross?
it's 260.
Yeah, so that's a reasonable pier, and that's kind of what we need to put in. So we're looking at 2 million. We're looking at 5 or 6 years of paying that back before we can start taking bites of the next one. We don't have to 100% finish paying for that. We can start engineering and some other cheaper things. So the question for you folks is that the way we want to operate? Or do we want to try and increase our revenue so we can start banging these out faster? The other thing is we currently don't have a cost share requirement. There's nothing in the statute and there's nothing the way we operate. That being said, we welcome it and we tell towns that it helps your place in the queue. And in the case of Salem, I basically said we have $1.5 million. To go much above that, the payback is so long that we didn't get involved. And they agreed they are going to find the other $1.5 million. And so that's the way that worked. It was an informal cost share. So it may be enough that we go forward like that, but just something to think about. Do we want to put it in writing that you need to come with a quarter of the money or something like that? But that will certainly change the list, I would guess. Because not all towns have that available or care about fishing piers that much, to be honest. The Salem Pier is really a jewel, and it's the high point of their Salem Willows Park. So they want it and they need it back. So that's why they're willing to go. So anyway, that's it. We're looking at $2 million, and we only have between 300,000 and 350,000 a year to get dedicated towards that. So next slide, Julia.
Mike, Patrick has his hand up.
Oh, Patrick.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, sort of quick. Another comment would be that, and going back to sort of the original intent of the, stay away from the financial discussion for a minute, but back to sort of the original intent of that working group that, that when we were putting the license together, I think that to me, saving, preserving, rebuilding a current access spot is a far more important thing than a new one. One of the reasons that public access came up in the license fund thing was that at the time back then, we were losing more access than gaining. And places that we know have fishing going on, but we're losing them because of lack of maintenance, et cetera. That's why Ross's job was created. That having someone to work on that stuff was an original intent of this whole part of the legislation. And so in my head, a priority in the program should be not losing current fishing spots. And that can fall into some of this stuff. So anyway, that was it.
Khalil here with a comment. Dr. Armstrong, I agree with what you said. I believe a cost share should be a priority if a town or a city is willing to come in and share some of the cost of the project, I think those projects, and I agree with Patrick said about existing projects as opposed to new ones. I feel that for this to be, I mean, we just don't have the money with the current license fee structure that we have, 41 years. Hopefully I'll still be alive by then. But I just don't see us being able to carry out the projects with the current structure that we have regarding the licensing. And so I agree with you regarding maybe getting something in writing that if we're going to take on a project, that the cost share would be a requirement.
Okay. One thing, I agree, Patrick, that if there is an important, busy pier that's falling apart, I think that should be a priority over a new one. I think we need to maybe, and Ross, you can weigh in, maybe redouble our efforts a little bit. My guess is towns see us building new piers rather than investing in old piers. We just need to make it clear that we will certainly help make old piers happen.
To respond to the idea of preservation of existing access, on the list of potential large projects, Lynn, the Willows Pier, the town has approached us. I believe that's now a DCR owned property, and that is a place where we could preserve access. And because there's gentrification going on there, when it reaches that point, and I don't know what the timeline is, that may become a priority at that point, because as we know, once the gentrification completely moves in, the ability to put in a public project becomes more difficult. And then another thing that happened this year, which I might be speaking out of school a little bit, because our small grant project is awarded in the end by the governor's office. And one of our small grants this year is a town that approached us to ask to protect existing ways to water. As we all know, in many towns, those existing ways to water get grown over. People put signage up who live there. They buy the property next to a public way. They go, I don't want people walking through here. So what this town did was they said, we want money to hire a surveyor, to buy signs, and to do brush cutting. And we are going to protect our public ways to water. So that, although that's not a big project, it really made me think a lot that this is a place where we could put small amounts of money and protect access the way that Patrick just brought up.
Yeah, and the Willows Pier, it's a really good project. It is in a very fishy place, but it's not terribly safe right now. It's to get to it, you have to walk through some fairly sketchy ground. But the town,
it's a tent city of homeless.
Yeah, and so the city of Lynn wants to turn that into a nice place. And of course, working with DCR is difficult under the best circumstances. And I think this is one where we would certainly ask for a cost share for DCR. So that one's a ways off, just because dealing with DCR for anything makes it a ways off. And plus, we're not going to do it until Lynn can commit to cleaning up the area and making it safe. But anyway, to that point, we will certainly keep our eyes out for projects like that, where it's good piers that need more work. So next slide.
Michael, hold on to just 1 minute. Mike Piarnock has his hand up.
Yep.
Mike Piarnock.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I agree with the points made about prioritization and so on, but I think also it should be looked at from an economic standpoint. If you're going to go to an existing location and upgrade it, if the economics are upside down, that it would be more cost effective to go to a new location to provide the same access. And I think it's logical you would do such. So I just point that out, that to go to former locations or existing locations, if that doesn't economically make sense, I'd just like that be put into consideration for any future redevelopment. Thanks.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. In some circumstances, a pier wasn't put really in the ideal place. it might be we want to just do a new one that's close by. All right,
Thank you.
next slide, Julia. So anyway, this is just, very briefly look at our revenue stream. And this is always interesting to look at. You can see we started in 2011, and every year we go up a couple of percent in how many permits we sell. So the grand total has finally gotten to 200,000. And as you can see, this interesting COVID year, we had a jump up of 9.7%, which is the greatest we've had. And the interesting part is you can see the non-residents drop down, which is completely in line with what you expect from COVID. So we are going up. Revenues will increase, but not very fast. The question is this 10% bump up going to be real? Are these people going to keep licenses, or are we next year going to see a decline for the first time in revenues? And I think that's a real possibility. Next slide. So in our consideration of enhancements, which we talked about this at the last meeting, I think we have a couple of things to consider, some more palatable than others, and we really want your opinion, and we won't move forward with any of this without your blessing. Keeping in mind, and Patrick, you can weigh in here, you were at the table, I think you were probably the only one, back in 2011 when we put the working group together. The Fed said, you have to pay us 15 or you do your own. So the panel agreed after discussion, yes, we want our own. We got the dedicated fund. Mike Moss dedicated a third to public access. It all went great. And then at the very last meeting, it was suggested by one person of importance that we were proposing $15, and everyone agreed that that was perfect. It's actually the median for the whole country, it's $15. And at the very last meeting, it was dropped to 10. So just keep that in mind. So possible revenue enhancements dealing with the permit are we can do a fee increase. We can do it from 10 to 15, 10 to 20. You can try and match our inland agency. And none of these are mutually exclusive. We can we can match and pick things. We could raise the age at which you get a free permit for somewhere between 65 and 70. It's currently at 60, as you know. We have no idea how that came about. We sent it in the legislation at 65 and it came out at 60. Nowhere else in the country is it as young as 60. It ranges from 65 to 70 in the rest of the country. We could apply a greater increase to non-residents. I know just a straw man, raise residents to 15, non-residents to 20. Again, that was another one. I'm not sure why we did it, residents and non-residents. It was really for ease in getting the permit in, as is my recollection. Most states, almost all states, charge non-residents more. And then we do have reciprocity with Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. And it is asymmetric, I believe, because I think most people come primarily to the Cape from those states to fish. It was mostly put in for boaters so that when you're near the line, like in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, you don't have to be looking at your GPS all the time and worrying that you floated over the state line. This one would probably be the most contentious. The other states have not brought it up, nor would they, because I think we're the ones that lose the most money by giving reciprocity to them. Something to think about. So we looked at what the first two would do. We didn't want to have a huge model that's confusing and all, but we can talk about what the effect of the other ones would be if you want. So next slide, we looked at the increases we would see. Hang on just a second. Can you see my mouse? Anyone?
No.
No? All right. Because we tried this before. Let me,
I can see the mouse.
Yeah,
it's
now
above
I can
the-
Julia's
it's above the
mouse.
C in scenarios.
oh
I
no,
think
can
that's-
you see mine? No,
Mike, I think I'd have to make you a co-host.
because this worked the other day. I guess it's not.
Mike, what do you want it to point to?
Well, I just wanted to be able to point to pieces of the chart, but I can walk through it verbally. So the first line just looks at the permit fee. So it's currently at age 60. We keep it at that. We currently bring in under the $10 permit, 1.5 million. That was this year, so it's bumped up a little bit. We were at 1.3 for a lot of years. If we go to $15, and again, so this is only based on people under 60 years old, we still have an increase of $763,000. So we'd bring the revenue from 1.5 to 2.3 million. If we did a $20, that would double what we bring in. So we bring in 1.5, we'd bring in another 1.5 for a total increase of 3 million a year. That's pretty substantial. If we raise the license to 65, we would then bring in 1.7 without raising the permit. So we'd raise about 200,000. If we go to a $15 permit and a free permit at 65, we'd raise $1 million. And if we went to 20, we'd raise $1.9 million. And then the same scenario of going to 70, without doing anything, we'd raise about 4 million. $15 permit would raise 1.3, a 20 would do 2.3 million. So there's some pretty substantial increases by moving money around. And that would allow us, again, to, if we brought in, I mean, in theory, a $20 permit and didn't do anything to the age, we bring in 1.5 million more. That means we could certainly pay off the new piers and which average 2 million much quicker. I mean, you can do the math. So that's all I've got. We didn't model what would happen with getting rid of reciprocity or increasing fees just for out-of-staters. Right now, we're only selling about 15,000 permits to out-of-staters, which is crazy low, because we believe there's probably 100,000, and so we're losing 85,000 people from primarily Rhode Island and New Hampshire don't buy our permit. So anyway, I guess what we'd like to know from you is, does this work? Do you want to increase revenues that it will be primarily put towards new projects, new piers, public access stuff? I will say if we get new money, we're not going to propose new projects and new staff. That's always a worry. Some of it by necessity, I think we'd want to use a very small proportion to cover the cost of living. If you remember from the spring, a couple times Kevin has presented within a couple of years, given flat revenues, the fund will go negative. I mean, we'll start losing money, and it'll take a while to use up the fund because we have a couple million reserve that we need to keep. But at some point, we need to enhance revenues just to stay afloat at the current level. So we may have to use a little bit of the money we bring in for that, but not very much. So I think that's all I've got. And
Mike,
So-
Kevin Blinkoff has his hand up.
yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Quick question. I obviously we're looking at here, the number staying the same if you raise the permit to $20, you know, assuming the same number of people buy a permit. Have there been other states that have increased the cost of their saltwater permit? And if so, what have they seen in terms of how that's affected the number of permits sold?
Oh, boy, that's a darn good question. We don't have any data, but you know what? We'll start looking around and asking. I mean, my gut feeling is we might lose some of the casual anglers. At 15, I doubt it. At 20, maybe you're getting into the realm of people second guessing buying a permit for going fishing once or twice. So you're right that maybe the increase is a little bit less than what we project there. Now, there is no rush to do this, and I don't think we would be able to do it very fast. We have to go to the Division of Administration and Finance, Division, Secretariat, whatever. And we'd have to go to public hearing, and we have to justify it to Administration and Finance too. The justification would be, especially for 15, is this is what every other state has it at. I mean, Alabama, Mississippi, where the cost of living is a half of what it costs to live around Boston, is a $15 permit. And I think that'll fly as an argument. But, you know, it'll take us, and Dan, you can weigh in, at least a year to work through all of this. So we'd be looking for in 2022, 2023. And we wouldn't, the awkwardness is we wouldn't want to be really going hell bent while we're still in the pandemic.
Yeah.
So this would be later next year. We'd start seriously working on it, I think.
Hey, Mike, if I could just make a couple comments. We raised the recreational lobster permit from $40 to $55 about, I don't know, Kevin, help me out, about 8 years ago, when we were seeking funding for the ventless trap surveys and other research projects. I think we did see a decline in participation after that increase. So I think Kevin's question is kind of suggesting that there may be a negative effect on total sales. The other thing is to consider, there are a number of people 60 and over who actually just give us money because I think they think that that they like the program, or they're surprised that it's free, but that we do get donations from some of those folks. And so, that may not continue at the same level if people are paying for the permit. I think the question for the panel members individually is, what are you comfortable with? What can you justify in your own mind if this were to, hit the streets and there's generates a lot of buzz? What are you comfortable defending? And I would say that in our conversation with the Senate Ways and Means Chairman, when we were talking about that Slates Ferry project, we explained to him, how we raise the funds and what the parameters are. He was really surprised that the 60 year was the free permit, and he thought the permit was low. So I think that on the age question, which obviously needs legislation to amend, I think that I'd be surprised if we had too much trouble with that because it's such a nominal permit. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah,
Patrick has his hand up.
Before Patrick, Dan brought up, I forgot that the age 60 is in the legislation. So we would have to get legislation to raise it, which is even harder sometimes than raising a permit fee. Patrick?
Okay, I'm not on mute. I had comments on a bunch of them, and could we get that other slide, the slide that had the list of options, was one before. Thank you. Yeah, I think that there's a, even though there's a concern about the, the pandemic has gutted financially a lot of people. But the length of time I think it would take to get it through, I'm assuming that we're going to be sort of out of that part of the financial crisis. I'm terrified about what's going to happen with budgets, et cetera, when government has to pay for this stuff back. But the 50% increase, I think, I don't think it's going to generate a lot of issue. I know that myself, I think that most people realize that it's very cheap, and I think going to $15, I don't think is going to bug a lot of people. I mean, there's always going to be somebody, but like personally, I could support $15, but I'm going to throw a caveat on that. I absolutely would not support any increase unless it goes across all the licenses, meaning like if we're going to go up 50% on individuals, then we got to go up 50% on the for hire permits too. That's just like the way it's got to be. I mean, why? I'm sort of surprised that we don't have the 2 for hire bullets that make sense, and that's a fee increase on the for hire, that matches it, like percentage wise. And also, I'm against the ending reciprocity, but right along with that should be ending that a for hire permit covers the clients. I'm against that, but that was an idea that has been talked about before. I'm against both of them. I think reciprocity works for us, for the citizens of Massachusetts too. And I know a lot of people who fish over the borders on both sides. The non-resident thing, I've supported a higher non-resident fee for a long time. Florida, it's like 3 or 4 times the amount. But finding out what a mean would be, I'd be open to that. And the original intention of that original legislation was to be 65, I believe, but I believe when we talked about it, the actual discussion was do it to match the freshwater license. Currently, the freshwater license is 70. I think 70 is I think the two fishing licenses should match that program. I think that they should be free at the same age. I don't see a reason to be different. I also think that's a selling point for the legislature. And my recollection is that there is some story about a legislator who pushed that down to 60. I think it was 65 originally in the original language, but I'm very open to matching the freshwater license at 70. Thank you.
Yeah, the language we sent into the legislature was 65.
Right.
It emerged at 60, and I don't know why, but I think, there's a language in the definition of disability that only goes to 60. And it's a strange thing. My guess is an aide somewhere saw that and said, well, let's make it consistent. Otherwise it's confusing, and dropped it to 60. That would be my guess. Things like that happen. So Patrick, I guess, so our inland is weird, and there's not a lot of states that do that. At 65, their fee drops in half and then goes to free at 70. Would you want to mirror that, or is that more complex than we ought to be thinking about?
I personally think it's complex, but I'm not opposed mirroring that as well. I think that a lot of the clubs, and I'll tell you what my mentality a lot of the clubs right now are having the same struggle that, not this financial presentation at this meeting, but over a couple of meetings, Kevin had shown that people aging into the free permit at a high number and taken out on a longer chart. We saw the funds sort of dipping and getting into places that we don't want to get to. That's my mental reason for that. That's why I support a fee increase and doing some things to change revenue stream. However, that's going on in many fishing clubs. I know of 4 fishing clubs that have actively changed, either raised dues, dropped lifetime membership stuff, split couples up into 2 memberships, all kinds of stuff going on. But everybody sort of understands that there's a lot of people aging out and not a lot of people behind them. And so financially, I think that makes sense to people. I'm not motivated by, oh, there's this big long list of projects and we need more money to do the projects. That's not my reason. I don't think that's a good reason to increase it. I think it should be increased because we're trying to make the fund stable at the current level of work. Thank you.
Okay,
Mike Pier has his hand up.
go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I have a few questions and then comments. If I recall properly, one of the reasons why this is before us today is because we have fewer numbers of young people getting licensed and actually going fishing. And as it's pointed out, the people that are older don't necessarily have to get permits. And in addition to that, there's matching grants that if I recall properly, that we or the DMF can get by having a certain amount of license sold. Can you go to the next slide, which shows the financials? If you increase the numbers with the matching grants that you would get, how much ultimately is the increase? I don't know if you have that number and have it broken down per category.
Yeah, I think, Mike, I think you're talking about Wallop Bro money, which is based on permit numbers.
Right.
But it's also based on area of the state, and it's in bins. And we have a fair amount of anglers, but because we're so small, I can't tell you how many permits. We currently sell 200,000. I bet we'd have to sell 500,000 to get to the next bin and get more money.
Okay.
I mean, things like places in the big bin are like California, Minnesota has, they're big geographically and have a lot of lakes and anglers. So I don't think increasing the number of anglers will get us more federal money.
And with your numbers you present here, since you have indicated, and it's really a nationwide, we're seeing the same, whether it's freshwater or saltwater with COVID, we're not just going fishing on the weekend. We're recreational anglers are going fishing 7 days a week. So there's been a significant increase. That's why our tackle sales and so on up and down the coast, we're seeing record numbers with tackle sales, boat sales, engine sales. It's reflective of that. So with this, when you look at your increase, are you assuming the 2020 numbers of people that signed up, or are you looking at the previous ones where it was less?
Good question. I think, let's see. We went off last year's. Kevin, you can weigh in.
Yeah, this is this year's data.
Okay. So
Yes.
just to point that out, so that could be less next year. It could be, if COVID never ends, maybe it's more. Who knows? But
That's a great question.
I just point that out. So if you can go to the previous slide, and then I'll give you my comments. Thank you. If I recall properly, you're saying other states are at 15 in general. Other states are at 15 with the 65 to 70 year age limit. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the median is 15 for the states I pulled out, which is almost all of them. The average is much higher.
Yeah.
Which tells you, they're not normally distributed, because some of them, particularly the West Coast, you're going to pay $40 or $50 for a saltwater license, resident.
Right.
And so that skews the statistics. So the median's a better indicator, but it also, cost of living, as
right.
We are crazy here as in the cost of living, highest in the nation outside of maybe San Francisco and Hawaii. So 15 is entirely reasonable. And the panel 10 years ago thought it was a reasonable number too.
So the first two bullets, I mean, you have justification of other states doing the same to provide a justification for those two. I mean, I can hear it now. If you don't increase it to the non-residents, I'm going to get the phone calls, you're going to get the phone calls, and I'm going to hear from everybody. Make them pay more than us. And I know you legally can't do that, but increase that as much as possible. Ending the reciprocity with the adjacent states, though, I know from a for-hire standpoint, I'm trying to minimize and make a process to getting permits and so on that's streamlined. And to do that, either from that standpoint or the other states don't follow the same, puts us at a bad disadvantage. And I'd rather not end the reciprocity so a recreational angler can fish in adjacent states, or a for-hire boat can go over the line and fish there too with the appropriate permits and so on. But so I don't know if I necessarily agree with ending that. With the fact we're going through COVID and people are struggling economically, and we're waiting for another package from the feds to get people some money while they're struggling. I agree, Mike, and what you have said, and Dan and so on. I believe that I would not want to implement any increase while we're going through these tough economic times. And I know other calls I'm going to get if such is proposed while people are struggling, whether it's for hire or it's recreational. I'd have to think a little bit of having an increase across the line with throwing another increase to the for-hire fleet, because I already know what I'm going to hear. I don't even have to go out and ask, so they're not going to be happy about it with our cuts and seasons, bag limits, and additional restrictions and additional costs, and this, it just never ends. So I'm not sure I can support that, and others could too. As far as making it consistent with the freshwater, they have like trout stamps, things of that sort. I don't know if that's something to consider. To increase it all the way up to $70, I'm tentative about that. I wish I lived in Florida right now with this weather, but the access and the opportunities and the variety of species they have, and the fact that they have artificial reefs everywhere to help attract fish for your shoreside as well as recreational boater, provides much more opportunity and access than you would get in other areas. So there's some states where it makes sense to me why it should be higher. I don't know if I'm there yet with increasing it so much. I'm not comfortable with that. You know, a $15 increase, that's the first step, I think, if you're going to go down that road.
So, Mike, are you in favor of the increase to 15 and the raising the age to 70?
Yeah, those first two bullets, the first two, yes, the third bullet, raise it real high, but you know what I'm saying, as high as you can. I am, but I really would feel better if you do this after COVID's gone and people get back on their feet.
Well, obviously it would be for next, it wouldn't be for 2021, it would be for 2022.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a crystal ball. I hope the economy continues and it's strong. So that's where I tentatively agree, conceptually agree to the basis, but I just don't know where we're going to be a year or two from now. COVID's gone and the economy's good, but if economy's bad and people are still struggling, a lot of people do fish just to put food on the plate. They're not catch and release. There's a lot to do catch and release. And I just would not want to, as you know, with COVID, the state has done a great job through the works of Ron Amadon and you, Dan, and the governor's office to make sure that we continue to have access to the fishery, whether we're going after oysters recreationally or lobster or fish, freshwater or saltwater, because it's recognized the fact that that's putting food in the plate, as well as the mental health aspect of that. So I'm happy to see that. And wouldn't want to put a fee that's going to result in people not being interested or just say, I'm not going to get a permit anymore. Lastly, this is kind of doing the end of pipe treatment, as I would call it, and not trying to address what the problem is. The problem is that we're not getting enough young individuals to fish. And I know this panel and there's been discussions of how we can do that and get more young kids to come and start fishing recreationally. That doesn't happen. We can raise this as much as we want, and it's not going to work. So I just throw that out there as something has to be done about that. We continue to speak to it. It's discussed on a national level, regional level, and a local level. And I just hope that that ultimately will work. Then we will get greater numbers that can help with this. Otherwise, it's going to just get worse, and we're going to have to increase it. And so we also need some of our activities to look at how to expand the young kids from coming in fishing. When you remove the tube and worm for young kids that would be excited to do such, well, there you go. You're providing another mechanism for not attracting young kids to fish. And the more constraints you put on the means and methods of which fish, you're just not going to want to do it. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, if I respond to a couple of those things and ask a question. Interesting you bring up the artificial reef, because we have funded one deployment of reef materials through this, and we debated whether building reefs is fishing access. And the panel at the time came to the consensus that, yes, we do think it's applicable under fishing access. And it's fairly cheap, 150,000 will bring a couple of barge loads. And we do have, I think we have a bunch of really great materials sitting in New Bedford right now, but we don't really have the money to deploy it. So that it's something I didn't think about. We present these large projects, but there is also opportunity for fairly cheap money compared to a pier to put out some more artificial reefs. And we've been working to try and permit some in Southern Cape Cod Bay too. Patrick brought up the fact that people on for hire do not need a permit, and headboat may be very different from charter. Do you have an opinion on that, Mike? I'm pretty sure I know what it is.
Well, yeah, well, we presently have to get a state charter headboat permit. I think it's $65 per vessel. And, you know, as I indicated earlier, I would not propose an increase because I already know what I'm going to hear. And you know what you're going to hear too. So,
but what if the anglers on your boat had to buy a permit? One could argue for $65, you essentially pay for your first charter, the people on your first charter. The rest of the charters, the rest of the year, are fishing for free versus every other person in a boat or shore is paying $10 for that. That's an argument that could be made.
No, understood. And then, you know, the difficulty of that is that every time they come show up, they're going to have to fill out paperwork. You're going to have to get that squared away before they come on the boat. From a client service standpoint, and we want to attract clients and not make it difficult or another long, drawn out, convoluted process. It's just much easier that you're covered under our permit and you could go. So there you go.
Yep. Okay.
Commissioner Amadon has his hand up.
Mike, I've heard quite a few comments mimicking the inland fishing games system, and I just wanted to point out what that is. At 15 years of age, you are required to have a fishing license. That license is free for 15, 16, and 17-year-olds. That kind of works out pretty neat because at 15, as you're required to have a fishing license, it's almost like a badge of honor. You're not a little kid anymore, but it's free. So after you've had it for 3 years, and now you're 18 years old and you're beginning to earn your way in society, you kind of hate to give that up. So you begin paying for it. And a regular license on inland is $27.50 currently. I think you're going to see that go up in the near future. And then at the 65 to under 70, it is $16.25. And then it becomes free at 70. That system seems to work pretty darn good. And if you were to mimic that in the numbers that you folks are talking about, then you would end up with 4 slots in the saltwater license as well. So your 15 to 17-year-olds are free. And then your residents up to 65, I think the number most you folks are proposing is $20. And then your resident license 65 to under 70 would be $10. And then your resident 70 and over would be free. That would be the closest correlation that I can draw from all of the comments that I've heard so far. And I'd also like to clarify that there are no trout stamps, as stated by my good friend, Mr. Pier. Thank you.
Ron, do you know in the 15 to 17 slot, do they need a permit, but it's free?
Correct.
Okay. And do they also permit their 70 and above, but it's free, or do you just not need a permit?
You know, I don't know that answer. That's a darn good question. I don't know that answer, but I can find out.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things when we put it in, so the feds actually monitor, they're reevaluating actually all our license or permit data. One of the requirements was, I think it was 16 was the cutoff. Everyone needs a license. You can give it to them for free, no matter what age, but you still need to go through getting a license. And that was so that there is a database for querying the effort estimate survey that's done by mail.
Yep. And that also, going back to the question regarding federal monies, such as the Wallop Row monies, I do believe Wallop Row, as well as the inland fees, it's based upon the number of licenses, not the values. So giving license to everybody, whether it be free, half price, or full price, counts towards your Wallop Row monies. Similar to the Pittman Robinson monies.
Right. But I think we're still a long way from hitting the next bin.
Yeah, Mike, could I speak to that real
Sure.
quickly?
Yeah.
And I apologize, but I think because I'm a co-host, I can't actually raise my hand. I think I just speak. I can lower everybody else's hand. But anyway, Wallop Row, free permits do not count. And Mike is absolutely right. It's a formula based on permits sold and size, geographic size. And Massachusetts, because of how small we are, we will never, ever, ever be anything but a minimal state. We just can't get there. And then, if I may, real quick, going back to Mike Peerdenach on getting the youth involved. I do actually have some numbers on this what we saw from last year to this year with a big bump up in COVID. And you guys may recall last year, Sam Cass did a presentation on R3. She was running that for Mike. And a big push was looking at millennials, getting families fishing to get the interest much sooner. But looking at this past year, most of the growth that we saw was in the 20s and below. In fact, almost all of it was for people under the age of 39. And in the group 61 to 70, it was only a bump up of 26 people. So we are somehow attracting, or maybe it was this year because everybody was at home, but the growth was squarely in the younger crowd. And I think that that's worth looking at maybe over the past decade, so we can see where the trends are. That's all.
Dan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to repeat my advice to the panel to try to come to some kind of a consensus of what is defendable and logical. I can only think of going to the boat show and my staff working, to sell permits and the exchanges that they have with the buyers of the permits. And sometimes they're very complimentary and sometimes they're pretty nasty. Well, having said that, I do have a concern about sort of the mixed debate, and I'd like to bring that to some kind of consensus about non-residents, because I've heard, I think two members of this panel talk about, the reciprocity being a good thing, because, for instance, people in Worcester County might want to drive down to the Connecticut shoreline or the Rhode Island shoreline without having to buy a permit from those states, and that's great. But if we follow Mike Pierdenach's advice about let's jack up the price on non-residents, we're talking about doing it to the Mainers, to New York, New Jersey, and Point South. But if we follow the advice of other members on the panel to continue reciprocity for what that provides, I think that's a really mixed outcome. And I think that a simple way to increase these fees of these first two bullets might just be simple enough and logical enough, and the average person and the average legislator might just nod at that without the complex changes that we're discussing with the unintended consequences of change. And then as far as the for hire goes, we know that the charter boats probably ranked neither number one or number two in terms of the COVID impacts this year. We know the oyster farmers are in terrible condition, charter boats, party boats as well. So I would also favor, going easy on that sector, at least for now, because of what they're going through. So I'd like to see more discussion about the reciprocity and fee increase for non-residents being really incompatible.
Dan, if I could clarify, are you talking about the awkwardness of ending reciprocity and increasing the money for non-residents? Or if reciprocity stayed the same?
Yeah, if we keep reciprocity, if we allow Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire fishermen to fish in our waters without a Massachusetts permit,
yeah,
which a couple of the members appear to be in favor of, and at the same time raise the rate for non-residents, then we're going to be sending, then we're going to be taxing, for lack of a better word, New York, New Jersey, and Point South and Maine anglers at a much higher rate, but not making any change to the New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut anglers. I just think that we have an opportunity to substantially increase the revenues of this fund with two simple modifications of a fee increase and just raising the age. I don't think either of those. I think a normal person or a reasonable person, I think, would agree with those two. The others have you're hearing Mike Pier and I talking about, opposition, and I don't know, you're going to give much opposition to those first two, a modest increase and a change in the age. But the others, I don't know. I just think there's some unintended consequences that could snag it.
Am I allowed to comment as well, Ross Kessler?
Go ahead.
No one sort of brought up, I mean, with the reciprocity idea, no one's brought up the idea of limiting it to only states we're next to. So for instance, New Hampshire and Rhode Island. I mean, I know that in freshwater, when we have, waterways that abut two states, they have reciprocity in those waterways. So I think that would certainly buffer things in a way. And I mean, I guess it would be where you land, not where you go out of. And that becomes complex. But when you go two states away, that's sort of a whole nother experience as far as travel goes, running a boat or anything else like that. So that's my only thought as far as reciprocity goes.
Ross, I'm not sure what you're telling us.
So you would my thought would be keep reciprocity with Rhode Island and New Hampshire, just
Yeah,
simply
but
because
what about Worcester County? I mean, the Worcester County folks drive to the shoreline, they go through Connecticut.
Right. Yeah.
That's
But
the point.
that's still, I mean, you kind of can't, you can walk into Rhode Island from Massachusetts or not New Hampshire, I guess. So it becomes sort of an odd idea. And by the time you get all the way through Rhode Island and into Connecticut, that's a distance to travel. And that, and for law enforcement, I think they're going to run into a lot more Rhode Islanders in Massachusetts and vice versa, versus people traveling from Massachusetts all the way to Connecticut and back. Or, I guess New Hampshire is a very small shoreline, so it's possible you could run into Maine, but, that way you keep friendly with your neighbors anyhow. And then a lot of Connecticut people travel to to Massachusetts in the summer times, but they're like, in a lot of cases, they're renting a house for a week or and that's a whole different, then the expense is very different.
Mike Pier has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Dan, I agree with you. The first two bullets are the easiest way to get this going and get it through, post-COVID and so on. So I would agree with that approach. I think Ron Amadon's still on. If I understand properly, if you even look at freshwater fishing license, hunting and so on, whether it's in Massachusetts or up and down the coast, everything has increased substantially this year because of COVID. I was curious, and maybe you probably don't have that information, but how that corresponded to freshwater as well as hunting, which here in this state or elsewhere are our numbers reflecting the same increase from a saltwater fishing standpoint. And yeah, that trout stamp, I don't fish for them anymore, so I'm a smallmouth, largemouth bass guy. I haven't done that in years, so I apologize for that error. Thank you.
I'll take a stab at answering your question. Massachusetts fees for both hunting and fishing are in the bottom 3% of the country. And the reason for that is they have not had an increase in the fees for 25 years. And the one before that, I think, was 34 years. We have continued to produce more and more services and have not gone up on the fees. In my personal opinion, it was a business mistake. I am asking everyone to take a very hard look at that, and I think you will see those fees in Massachusetts going up within the next couple of years. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It sounds like to me the old Yankee mentality is the result of that, but thank you.
Kevin Blinkoff has his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to also say, obviously the first two bullets, that's the easiest way to go. And I think of fee increase from $10 to $15. By the time it goes through post-COVID, I think we'll be, thinking of our audience and readership will be accepted. I think if you go to $20, the headline just immediately becomes that it doubled. And that's all you'll hear is, the fee doubled, did what I'm getting in return double? So that would be my concern with going to $20, although I do think you almost want to start thinking today. If we're looking at an increase to $15 in 2021 or 2022, think about how are we going to get to $20 maybe by 2025 or something like that. Same thing with raising the age to 70. I think if you put it in context of I think most people would think, oh, I assumed it was 65 or 70. They'd be surprised to know that that's not what it was. We talked a little bit about reciprocity with adjacent states as being uneven. In terms of license revenue, obviously that's true, but on the other hand, I wouldn't want to do something that discourages all these day trips. You see so much of that from adjacent states, people saying, the fishing's good right now at the Cape Cod Canal or on Cape Cod, people making day trip type travel without having to buy a permit from Massachusetts. They're more likely to come. And yes, they're not spending money on a license, but they are spending money in local shops, businesses, et cetera. Coming from New York, New Jersey, even Maine, it's more of a planned trip. And I feel like people are used to spending money on a non-resident license. They're okay with that. But at the same time, also agree with Dan, I don't think it's fair to really do a greater increase for non-residents. So I think keeping that increase the same between residents and non-residents will also be well accepted.
Khalil has his hand up.
Thank you, Nicola. I'm looking at this, and for me, I'm a firm believer of keeping things simple and doing things in baby steps. That's sometimes the way that things are going to get done more efficiently and quicker. And I would support the concepts of the first two bullets. Maybe the last two bullets would be for another time. But if we're looking to get this through and to be accepted, probably on a wider range from the participants who would be benefiting from the license, I think we should as a group concentrate on the fee increase, whatever that might be, and the age concept. And I think that everybody had some pretty good arguments. I ran a charter, very successful charter boat business. I had 100 to 110 trips per season. For me to try to keep track of a non-resident, whether they had a license or not, or they had to fill out a license before we went out, it would have been really inhibiting the business a great deal. So Mike Pier made some nice arguments regarding not raising the charter boat fee, and also that would affect not dealing with the reciprocity part of it. So I think we need to concentrate on the first two bullets. I think we can get that done, and it's going to benefit everybody. I don't think it's going to create a problem as far as less participants because of the increase. And so those are my comments. And I don't know if that what we want to do from this point on as far as the meeting is concerned.
All right, so yeah, okay, so I think what we'll do, maybe we'll talk a little more and see what we have for consensus. And we'll go back and think about it, come up with a straw man, and see you guys in the spring with a proposal. So what I'm hearing is I think 15 is the number we want to go with. And Khalil, I'll hand it back to you. You can query the members. But that's what I've heard. Reciprocity seems to be something we don't want to end. We had maybe a mixed signal on increasing for non-residents. And then the age, I I heard simple a lot, which would be, make it 65, or some states are 66 actually, or some other one. The question, and I'll ask Ron, is there any elegance or importance to us looking like the inland agency? Cohesiveness within the department? Do you think that's important? I mean, we've gone off on our own for 10 years. What do you think about that?
Well, I thought I could answer that pretty easily till you threw the word elegance in there. That's not in my vocabulary, Mike. but no, the only value to that would be that duplication creates simplicity, and everybody likes to have things that are easy to understand. There is no bureaucratic reason why it should mimic it. It is a completely different experience. So, I mean, you have by far more variety of fish and more fish in salt water than you do in freshwater. It's a matter of access. You have a tremendous amount of access to the inland waters. And that's why you folks so hard to do what you do. And that's why you folks are considering whether or not your numbers are where they are, is access to saltwater fishing difficult. You either got to stand on a shore and have some pretty darn good skills, or you got to get a ramp. I mean, fishing from party boats and head boats and charter boats is not always financially feasible for everyone. You can get a canoe and do a pretty good job with freshwater. So no, I don't see any reason other than simplicity to somewhat mimic the inland fisheries.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could, Mike Armstrong, I guess I would express some concern about, parking this until the spring, because we may be in a situation with the legislature where there's interest to move this between now and then, possibly in a budget document. And so I guess I would ask the panel if they would object to a 70, because we're talking about the age of free permits, which is what's in the statute, not the ANF proposal to raise the fees. So is there any objection among the group for us to, if we have an opportunity to ask the legislature to change the statute, to make it age 70 that you would, for which you would get a free permit? Is there any objection to that? And if you were asked by your stakeholders, the people you are communication with, could you support that?
And I'll lead that off. I have no problem with that whatsoever, and I do think we need to get a consensus from the panel members. So please, panel members, please chime in. Again, I think that we need to get this done, and the increase needs to be taken care of. Dan, did you say 15 or did you say $20? I didn't hear.
No, all I'm talking about at this point is the age, because that's a legislative issue, and we don't really have control over when a legislator files a bill. But let's say we were asked in January by somebody who wanted to, create a budget amendment or something, or in February when that typically process starts, and we weren't prepared to convene you folks for another 3 months. I just think it'd be valuable to get your feedback on a number for which the age would be, or the permit would be free. Just the age question.
Yeah, to Dan's point, it's far easier to get legislation by attaching it to the budget in the form of an amendment of some sort, rather than a standalone item that goes through the legislator. Dan's, it's a very good point, because we only get one crack at that a year. And that's generally around this time when budgets are starting to get formulated for the next year.
Let me jump in again with that, going from 60 to 70. For some people that they're gonna say, you know, all of a sudden we're changing the goalposts, and would there be a grandfathering in of those who are already getting it free, or would that be a bookkeeping nightmare?
I think it would be a nightmare.
Okay.
If I may, the legislative process takes a very long time. And there is plenty of opportunity built in that system for revisions, alterations, upgrades, whatever word you want to attach to that. In fact, you folks saw it the hard way when they last minute at the 11th hour changed it from 65 to 60 some years ago. So I agree with Dan. I'll simplify it even further. I would not say that we're looking to raise any of the rates. I think we're looking to update the current license system. And for me, I would not ask my legislative people to go out to the legislators to begin the process of finding someone to champion this effort without the approval from you folks first. So if you folks were simply to agree today that it is time to update the fee structure, then I could begin working with and for DMF to spearhead that effort. And you've got time to fine tune what you believe that needs to be. But we need to begin to find someone to champion this soon, very soon. Thank you.
Kevin Blinkoff has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I didn't make it clearly before, I think on that second bullet, raising the age to 70, I'm good with that. And I feel like that is easily explainable, especially with licenses sold, often people buying it at the same time as a freshwater license. And if that's that sort of free threshold at 70, I think that most people will understand that, and that should be easy to do. So I would support that.
Mike Piernock.
Thank you. I'll second what Kevin just said. I agree with 70. I'm sure there's going to be individuals that will not be happy with, but I think the vast majority of people will. When you have to get a surface lure or a plug that's $15 to $20, and we're considering that what the value or price of this permit is, it's, you know, I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Patrick Paquette.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. So I agree with the 70. I think we have consensus on that. Although I'm in favor of an increase, I do not agree unless the increase is going to be, unless there's going to be some sort of an increase with the for-hire license permit as well. It's really, and I didn't really want the argument to get to this, but like, and make no mistake about it, I want to be very clear. I have empathy for the for-hire business. One, because I have paid plenty of taxes being in that business. But two, because I get that they were shut down in ways that some people might argue weren't fair. But at the same time, so were, and I'd argue probably more, of the people who bought the saltwater fishing license. Because those people work in restaurants, and they work in schools, and they work on trains, and they're just like everyday citizens. And we continue to ask the everyday recreational citizen angler to carry more of a burden. And I'm sorry, I just cannot, and I think like I do, and I agree with the arguments made about the 15, but I'm sorry, it's just not fair. It's not fair that, and especially Mike brought up one of them, I can make a bunch of other ones. But I'm really, this isn't about, you know, attacking the for hire. It's about, if we're gonna increase the burden of the Massachusetts permits, it should be across what we're doing now. To pick one segment out of 4 or 5 segments and say, only you guys are gonna get a 50% increase, but we're not gonna increase anything else. I just can't support that, even though I support an increase in general in the conversation. But I'm sorry, it's just,
Khalil, if I could comment to Patrick, Patrick, I understand your logic perfectly well, but the truth is, we're talking about 2 different actions that with 2 different, legal bodies. We are going to the legislature to ask them to move that age limit. Then we go to A&F in the governor's office and ask for fee changes with public hearings. I don't think it's appropriate to say no to the change in the age without a commitment regarding the for hire permit, because it's 2 separate processes and we can't guarantee what the outcome would be of a fee increase.
yeah, hold on, I'm sorry. I don't tie those 2 together.
Oh, I thought you were, so
No,
I'm sorry.
if that's the way that it sounded, that's not my intention. Not at all.
All right, thank you. I thought that's what you were saying.
I think we have consensus, or I am on that board of going to 70. I'm there now with no caveats.
Okay, so we do have consensus, I think, on 15 and 70. Just a quick calculation, Patrick, you would like to see the charter license go to $97.50, which would be the same proportion as what we're doing with the regular rec angler.
Yeah, yes, and to be clear, and the reason I'm for that particular version of it is that I agree with what has been stated here. I think that is a more convenient thing than making the people that get on those boats, making the customers and making, putting the captain and the mates and the people in the industry in that position where they have to be going through this conversation, and then they're going to probably have trying to help some of the customers who have a problem and getting their own license or whatever. And when you talk about the actual numbers of patrons that are being serviced versus the amount of the license, I think it's cheap, reasonable, but I think it's in the right place. But yeah, Mike, that's what I think is the right thing, as opposed to breaking it off.
Okay, good. I've written all that down.
Khalil?
Yes, thank you, Nicola. I like what Commissioner Amadon said regarding wrapping the first 2 up into a general concept that we need to take this to whoever it has to be taken to say that we're going to re-examine our fee structure. I don't want to get into whether or not it's the 15 or 20 or the less than under 60 or above 70. But I think we need to do that, and I think we should probably again keep it simple. I understand what Patrick is saying regarding the for hire fleet. I myself personally would not be for that, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have merit in what he was saying. But I think for what we need to do, we need to get this taken care of today so that we can direct or give some direction to DMF as to pursuing the change in the fee structure. So I think we should concentrate really first on the first 2 bullets. At the 70 age, we're going to have to sell that because you're going from not paying any fee to now having to pay a fee. So that, but I believe with some education and some rationalization and some logical discussion with the folks before that, we can deal with that. And I have no problem with $15. I have no problem with $20. But I have to agree with what Mike Pier said. that we need to keep in mind that we're going through some tough economic times right now, and understanding that this is not going to happen in 21, that we're looking for 2022. So I think we need to, as a panel, come to a consensus. I myself personally feel we just need to deal with the first two bullets, try to get that process rolling, and then how it evolves from that. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion behind the scenes, but I think we need to get a consensus. My feeling is I would like to just concentrate on the first two. I'd like to hear from the other panel members also.
Mike Piernock.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the first two, that's what I'd like to concentrate with, the first two bullets. I can't support a raise to the for-hire fleet. One thing I think should be pointed out here is that as a good, credible charter boat captain, that I have a marketing plan to attract clientele when I do such and have a successful business. I'm not having issues with attracting young kids on the boat, where overall for your private recreational angler, we're having problems with the private typical day-to-day people having kids get into fishing and buying a permit. That is where the problem lies. Problem doesn't lie at the other end if I'm a successful business. Yet you want to increase our fees to reflect what is the problem with the system and one of the reasons why we want to increase this. So I just want to point that out. I can't support an increase at this time. Thank you. To the charter head boat. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands. Khalil?
Yes, thank you, Nicola. Director McKiernan, do you feel that you have enough information or from the
Yeah.
panel as to the direction you want to move in?
I think we do, given that we're not going to meet again for 6 months. In the event a legislator wants to file something, the only thing that they wouldn't be filing fee increases, they would only be filing an amendment to the age at which the free permit is available. And so to change the fee rates, that's a more internal process where, you know, Ron and I need to talk to the secretary, who talks to the governor's office and deals with ANF and through public hearings. So, you know, that's on a separate schedule. So Ron, if you think we've got enough, I think we do. And thank the panel for coming to consensus on those first two bullets, which is a raising the age from 60 to 70, and then administratively beginning a process with an increase in the per angler rate of the $10 to $15 range. I think that's what I'm hearing.
If I could clarify one thing, and I think this is right, we all worry about doing anything in this pandemic period, but I believe if we manage to get legislators to raise it to 70 quickly, we still have to do our own regulations in-house, right, to change that?
I would
So
turn.
we could delay that piece until we're also doing the fee increase. Is that right? So
Kevin,
they
do
come
you
out
know
at the
what's-
same time.
Kevin, can you tell us what's in the ANF regulations on this permit?
It's we're good. I did look that up already. Dan's absolutely right about changing chapter 130. It currently says 60, so you go to 70. In ANF's regulations, it just says the recreational saltwater fishing permit is $10.
Oh.
And then in our statute, it says we should not charge a fee for 60 and over, something like that. I don't know if Mike is asking, do we have anything in the CMR in 322 that talks about a 60 age structure?
Yeah, well, my point was, say we moved quickly and we actually got a budget amendment and got it to 70, well, that would be maybe in June or July. We might not want that to happen at that point because we'll still be in the pandemic. What I'm saying is that that doesn't change it to 70 immediately, right? We still have to put regulations in, and we could delay that so that it matches up to when we do the fee increase. Is that right? If that makes people feel better, that everything would happen in 2022 if we wanted it to. I think that's mechanically how it could happen.
I think you're right, Mike.
All right. So Khalil, I think we have enough to move forward.
Okay, you're looking for a vote, or you're just looking for the consensus through this discussion?
I think that would be up to you, Mr. Chairman. We're comfortable with consensus, to be honest.
I think we understand where we're coming from. I do want to get back to Patrick's concern about the for hire fleet. As I said, I'm not for it. I'm not in favor of raising that fee, coming from my own personal experience. But I don't think we need to discount what he was saying either. And I think that maybe that's going to be a whole nother discussion for another time, or maybe a discussion between Patrick and DMF on a sidebar discussion. And I think, Patrick, I don't want you to feel that we're disrespecting what your thoughts are or what your concerns are by any means. But if you want to continue that discussion, maybe, you should do that with Director McKiernan and the other folks at DMF. And then we can maybe re-examine that, or maybe it's not even a purview of the rec panel. But if you still have those concerns, please feel free to reach out.
I put my hand up.
Go ahead.
I don't understand the last part of that, Khalil, about the purview of the rec panel. Can you just, I don't want to take that wrong.
Well, it seems clear from at least two of us that we were not in favor of the increase for the head boats or the charter boats. And I just was trying to be respectful to you that you brought up an issue that we're not in favor of, and that if you thought that you wanted to pursue this further on your own to discuss this with DMF, that you should go ahead and do that. And I just didn't want you to feel that we were disrespecting your feelings or your thoughts regarding raising a fee. It was a personal thing, that's all.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, Khalil. I guess my response would be that 2 of 5 people have chimed in on it. I can pretty much tell you where Mike Moss is going to be if he was here. But I'd love to see this, and I'm going to ask for some specific data to help with this discussion. The number of for hire permits versus the number that actually took assistance from PPP and from the CARES Act. There's some other pieces of information that I'd like to enter this discussion. The number of passengers that actually get on those vessels. There's some numbers here that I think need to be realized when we're gonna. And I thought it was interesting the way that Dan brought it up when Dan was referring to the out-of-state residents buying a license as a tax. And it's funny because that was the initially the entire community viewed this whole thing as a tax. And it's very interesting that like an individual citizen is going to get taxed here more.
Patrick, if I could, I'd like to retract that word. I'm sure my legal counsel would be slapping me if I called it a tax because it truly is a fee. But it is an amount that's levied on the individual, for lack of a better term. And all I'm saying is that that it would be inconsistent for a New Yorker to be facing a substantially raised fee while a Connecticut angler had no fee. And so that was my essential argument, is that it's, if we're going to accommodate the out-of-state anglers in our adjacent states, it's not, that's, the spirit of that is not consistent if we were then to raise rates for estates just beyond our neighbors. It just didn't feel right. And my staff at the boat show, I don't think would have, a very good way to defend that.
Rhode Island and New Hampshire do the same thing. Rhode Island is $7 for an individual, $10 for an out-of-state, and $5 for a 1-week permit across the board for anybody.
Mike Beardenach,
No, thank you. Khalil, I appreciate your words, but in this forum, we're all subject to our own opinions. That's why we're at the table. Maybe I'm old school and I don't look at anybody disrespecting me because we may not have to agree with what was being said. That's just why we're all at the table here. We're here to provide our opinions. There's no disrespect intended. And I just wanted to point that out because I think that's the way it's supposed to work, whether it's here or any other forum. Thank you.
Kevin,
Yeah, not to keep this going too long, but I just wanted to chime in and say I support Patrick's way of thinking about this, but I was staying quiet because I honestly have to admit I don't know the history. I need to learn more about it of the for-hire permit. I don't know how long it's been in existence, when the last increase was. So before I make any specific statement, I just wanted to learn more about that maybe at another time. But in general, I do support what Patrick's saying of if we are going to increase the burden on individual recreational anglers by 50%, we should look at that burden being equitable, being shared with other parts of the rec fishery.
Mr. Chairman, if I could weigh in. Kevin, to your point, the license, the for-hire licenses were put in at the same time as the rec license. The $65, I, for the life of me, don't know where we got that. I think we pulled it out of the air and then we said, well, head boats take a lot more, so let's double it. But just as we go forward, it would be an equity issue. And I agree with Patrick that if we're raising the private angler, maybe the whole fleet should be going up. But it's not a revenue issue because we issue about 800-ish charter and maybe 40 head boats. And if you do the math, it's under $30,000 that it would generate. So it's fairly trivial, the money. So as we go forward and we talk about it and consider it in the future, it's an equity issue rather than a cash issue.
Mike, I'm not seeing any other hands up.
So I think we have what we need to move forward. Mr. Chairman, I think we're done with this unless someone else wants to weigh in.
I think we're right. And Mike Pier, I most certainly didn't, maybe I used the wrong word when I said disrespect. That probably wasn't the correct word to use, but I appreciate you coming back and clarifying. Any other comments regarding this? I see Dan's hand is up.
So working with Ron on this question, if we were to put together a package for the governor's office for A&F consideration for a change in fees, can we agree to go back to allow the 5 members of this panel to sort of, if not convene in a meeting, at least to weigh in with us, one-on-one with whatever the details of that package will be, because I don't think we want minority opinions to be, coming out of this rec panel. I think it'd be valuable to have some kind of consensus on that, although we don't have to resolve these issues today about the raising of the fee for the full hire. But I think the smart thing for us to do is to communicate to this panel before we would submit a package to the governor's office. Ron, do you want to weigh in on that?
I would agree, yes.
Yeah, so you'll get another bite at this apple before we would do that. But this gives us a chance that if a legislator wants to make a move on this sooner, on the age issue, that can go forward independent.
Mike?
Mike, you're not.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Just for clarification, yeah, I agree. It should come before this body, and then I'm assuming then it goes up to the commission for review and approval, and then to the governor's office. Is that the process? Or is that
no.
incorrect?
No, Mike, we've never really used the commission for the setting of fees. Given that this is strictly on the recreational side, I think having this panel and knowing the makeup of this panel, I think you're the subject matter experts. I wouldn't consider the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission more informed on this or more valuable in terms of the feedback. But I think it would be in your domain to weigh in on it. And that way, when we submit the paperwork to the governor's office, we would say that this has been, in whatever it is, has been endorsed by the Marine Recreational Development Panel. And I think that would have a lot of weight.
That sounds good. Thank you. Make it simple, and I like the process. Thank you.
Okay, not hearing any other comments regarding item number 3. Is it safe to assume that we can move on to item number 4? All right, at this time, we will allow panel members to discuss any further issues that they'd like to present at a future meeting or discussion.
I'm not seeing any hands, Khalil.
Okay, then Nicola, do we have any persons that have a public comment?
Nobody from the public on the meeting.
Nothing. So, okay, so we can move to item number 5. I have,
Khalil, would you like to give one more shot at getting the sound on that video?
yes, let's do that.
All right.
All right, give me 1 minute.
I think it had to do with the fact that it was trying to be played by someone who wasn't the primary host.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
We can see it, but can we hear it?
Can you hear it?
Yep.
Yes.
The Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries works on behalf of saltwater anglers to improve fishing opportunities along our coast. At DMF, we're dedicated to improving public access for fishing enthusiasts of all ages. Our newest project is a brand new fishing pier at Pier Island in Boston, part of the Boston Harbor Islands National Recreational Area.
Deer Island was a perfect match to what DMF looks for when choosing new locations to improve shore fishing. Fish readily available in the area, accessibility, community need, municipal support, and cost. This project was accomplished through a collaboration with the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority and the Department of Fish and Game's Office of Fishing and Boating Access.
We welcome all anglers to enjoy the newest fishing pier at Deer Island, and we look forward to future projects to enhance saltwater fishing access all along our coast.
So that's the trailer. It's going to be 3 times longer in the final product. And each of your photos is going to appear where we describe that the spending is overseen by you guys on the panel.
Thank you so much, Dan. I'm looking forward to seeing the final product. Looks awesome. Any further comments? Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Panel members? May I have a
Sorry, I
panel
was,
member?
yeah, so made.
Who made the motion?
Patrick Buckner.
Thank you. Do I have a second, please?
Yeah, second from Kevin.
Thank you so much. All those in favor, I'm assuming will be unanimous.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion carries. Thank you so much. And I know we went over, it, but this was a very important discussion, and hopefully we've given some guidance to DMF. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.